I'd like to kick this off with a Bible verse, Matthew 13:13, and I think Nancy made mention of it. Because they look but do not see, they listen but they do not hear, neither do they understand. I think this is pretty much what happened. The question that we asked ourselves when the research came out in Kenya on the issue of sextortion is, how did we miss this? How did we miss it? We've been practitioners for the last 15, 20 years, and yet this is something that just started emerging a couple of years ago. And to answer that is, we look at these cues, Alana, but we just see a cue. We did not look behind the veil to see what was actually going on in those cues. How did we think for 1 minute that a 1 kilometer queue would not be having issues of sextortion, of unwanted attention? She gets up at 4 o'clock in the morning, queuing there until 9 o'clock. A slight flirt over here, a wink over there, to try and get yourself ahead. That's one of them. The issue of not affordability is another issue. So I think this has been a bit of, we need to be a bit critical in terms of our failing in the issue. For Kenya, actually, in 2015, we just really stumbled on it. It's not like we had gone looking for the issue of sextortion, but just when we were doing power dynamics within a community or trying to understand who manages water and who's in power, the stories started coming out. We didn't get much traction at the beginning, of course, but then #MeToo came along. And that was the perfect alignment of stars for us, because the issue could actually be brought back again. I remember at the Stockholm World Water Institute, World Water Week, in 2018, number one, we had the utilities saying that if you go up there and talk about this, I'm going to say that you're not telling the truth. Number two, are you sure you're not looking for issues on the ground so that you can get additional funding? And number three, actually, and I remember that was my opening statement for sextortion, is that when you Googled sex for water in 2018, of course, you can imagine what it is you found, which had nothing to do with sextortion. And when you Google sex for water today in 2023, the issue of sextortion is actually front page. So I think that is a big achievement, I think, that we've all contributed to so far, at least changing the narrative on what it is. Now, in terms of what can we do? All right. Now, in Kenya, it's true that we've moved quite ahead. Legislation, that was the first thing that was missing. And this is something that we've talked about quite a bit. Law, and we've actually drafted a bill on sextortion. Unfortunately, our funding ran out. So now we're actually just really doing this on a pro bono basis because of the windows of opportunity that have been provided to us by the various legislators to bring this bill forward. And that's what we're currently working on. Two, support. Now, who would have thought that a water organization would be setting up psychosocial support centers to address the issue of sextortion? We really needed to give something back to the victims, to the survivors, and that meant actually budgeting for and setting up these counseling centers with doctors and counselors to speak to these women who, as it is, there was a great sense of shame. We also needed quite a bit in terms of awareness, which was the biggest bottleneck, the issue of consent. At the beginning, we used to hear a lot in the communities, willing buyer, willing seller. There was the understanding of consent, will and permission. There may have been permission, but there was no will. So these are really some of the things that we had to cut through. And then recently, of course, another break in the environment, where we had the sex for jobs scandal within the tea industry. So we got calls from legislators in terms of what's happening with that bill, because not only did the water sector actually bring the issue, document it, but it's actually going to have implications for all the sectors to address all the issues of sextortion. How are we going to do it in terms of legislation? Kenya, fortunately, is quite advanced in terms of Sexual Offences Act, different types of actually legislation that address this. So it was coming in, and it is coming in as an amendment to the Sexual Offences Act. The issue of sextortion is vaguely mentioned only in the Employment Act for now. So we hope that this is going to cast a much wider net. So I think in terms of defense, you need to look, you need to see what is going on. That queue is not innocent. That Bowser coming in is not innocent. That yellow jerry can, the guy who's pushing it, those water tanks, a lot more needs to be done. But I also think in terms of innovation, what is it that we can do to ensure that women never have to fetch water again? Quick, interesting example from India recently, Odisha, that launched a campaign, Right Tap Water in the informal settlements, which is they removed all these vendors and made sure through force that actually every household, whether it was a tin roof house or a mud hut, actually got access to water. And thank you, Alana. Those are my contributions.